Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM. Welcome to another edition of Food Farm Talk, where we celebrate food and honor those who champion the cause of food in society. Hello, welcome to another episode of Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM. I'm your regular host, Abdurrahim Abdullahi. And today, I would say it is an episode of science communication, because it is an episode where two communication activities merge to talk about communicating science knowledge and what we do regularly on this radio station. So I have with me here an interesting guest, Josh. But without wasting my time, I'll give him an opportunity to introduce himself.
Hi, Abdul. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm Josh Moran. I'm the communications intern for the OAC this summer, and I guess we're here to talk about the podcast that I'm releasing as a summer project with the college.
Yeah. So I met Josh a few months ago after you. I think that was just at the start of your internship for the summer, when you were about to start this podcast. And the podcast is almost through right now. I've seen a couple of them and they are really interesting, and I thought it would be wise that we talk about it, let listeners know what it is about.
The podcast is called the Why and How, and Abdul was nice enough to meet with me and give me some advice in terms of how to maybe get a interview process started going. It was very helpful, so thank you for that. I'm really excited to see the podcast come out, and like I said, a few episodes I've listened to have been really interesting. Oh, thank you.
So without wasting my time, before we get into a whole aspect of the the podcast itself, I don't know if you can tell us a little bit about your background. How did you end up in being interested in food and agriculture?
Well, I grew up in Eastern Ontario, a little town called Berwick. So very, very small town. My family actually runs a trucking and excavation company, but I grew up working on dairy farms, and that sort of is where this passion for agriculture stemmed. And the Ontario Agricultural College was pretty well the only choice. So since I've come here, I've learned about all the different opportunities that there are in ag. And, as much as I still love milking cows, I still milk cows a few times a week, I'm definitely involved in a lot of different aspects to it now. So it seems like it's always been the path. So I'm glad I'm here for sure.
So from what you are saying, I can kind of pick up from that the fact that you've had a bit of experience from back home dealing with agriculture and stuff. Mm-hmm. But what actually motivated you to take the path of going to Ontario Agricultural College and getting involved in agriculture, besides like what you do working on farms? Actually motivated you to take the agricultural path? Your education.
Agriculture, aside from the background, Canada has some of the best, highest quality food in the world, and to be able to pursue a career in one of these fields was always kind of in my mind. So the OAC and working in agriculture and learning about these systems was always the path for me. And now this idea of being able to work in agricultural communications and teach people about agriculture and put things into layman's terms, that's a huge draw, right? So
and that's something we will talk about in later part of this episode. It's really important to always communicate some of the things we do out in the university to, as you said, the layman's language for people to understand. There's a lot going on here that most of the time there's a lot of misconceptions about agriculture, and in earlier parts of this show, we've talked about misconceptions in agriculture. And without really wasting so much time, and tell us a little bit about your summer work. Like, what is it about, and how did you end up taking up such a project as a summer work?
Okay, this is it's kind of an interesting story as to how this job came to be. It was in I was in second. Well, I'm going into my third year, but in the agricultural science program. But I was in my second year in one of my labs, and we ended up I ended up talking to one of the TAs at the end, and I said, well, what do you think of this idea? It was just throwing it up in the air, this idea of running a podcast, to educate people and teach them about agriculture, people that may not have access to this information. And said, oh, that's a great idea. And then she pointed me in a general direction, and I started talking to people and more people. And I ended up meeting up with Rennie Vanacker, the dean of the OAC, at the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair, and he pointed me in the direction of Stephanie Craig, who's my manager and has been the backbone of this project. So, and that's the position fell into place, and I told them the idea, and they were for it, and they've been super supportive. And now we've got a few podcasts out, and we're achieving what we set out to. And I mean, it's cool to see that goal kind of come to fruition, eh?
Yep. So this looks very interesting. I'm always fascinated when an idea turns into fruition, right? Because when people have a lot of ideas, and sometimes it's hard to turn the idea into an actual activity. So kudos for being able to push through with all the support you have to be able to turn your idea.
It's just a lot of luck and a little bit of persistence. That's all it is. So I think from my half, so you can pretty well do anything if you put your mind to it. I was always told so. And I mean, it doesn't have to be a podcast, but if you're in the industry and you're able to, you can advocate in many, many ways, whether it's online with like a social media post or just telling a neighbor something that they don't know about your farm or your industry, So
yeah, that's really interesting. So let's dive a little bit deep into this podcast.
Sure.
Can you tell us a little bit about what is the podcast about?
Yeah, okay. So the podcast is called the Why and How Podcast. So we talk about issues in food, the environment, and agriculture. When we record these episodes, we often talk about topics like Beyond Meat and some of the economic implications of things like that, but we also delve into some of the college's research. So, I mean, in my mind, not only is it a great way to promote education, but it's also an amazing way to showcase some of the great work coming out of this college. And keep in mind, if you do decide to listen to the episodes, that I'm no expert interviewer, and it's just as much a learning process for me. So
yeah, that's always normal. Everything starts from somewhere. But the episodes I listened to speaks otherwise. They were really great, and I really enjoyed listening to them.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.
So can you tell us a little bit about some of the topics you've mentioned Beyond Meat? What are some of the topics you have covered so far?
Yeah, so as you may know, the OAC actually covers a variety of different units. So we go into plant ag-based things. So we talked about micropropagation, so growing plants in test tubes, you can almost put in that sort of way. We've talked about indigenous guardianship programs for fisheries, all sorts of things. So like things ranging from rural development to food science to environmental issues like how is climate change affecting bees, how bees are struggling and how we can improve that. All sorts of things in regards to those three topics of the environment, food, and agriculture. So
who have been some of the guests you've featured on the show?
Yeah, so we've featured mostly postgraduate students, a few professors now to this point. We've had people on like Dr. Alana Pindar, who's a postdoctorate fellow for the for Nigel Rain's lab at the School of Environmental Science. Yes, that's one on bees, and and master students as well. In terms of faculty and professors, we've had Dr. Ben Bohr of food science on. So, I mean, these people that we have on are so incredibly smart. I mean, again, I'm just an undergraduate student, and I'm a far shot from being a genius. But to be able to sit down and listen to that, not only is it a tool to kind of, like I said again, to educate, to reiterate that point, but it's also a great tool for me to learn about things that I had no idea about. I mean, I don't think I would have had the opportunity to learn about some of these topics because, you've only got so much time here learning. So,
yeah. That's really interesting, and it's really a bit fascinating to, as you mentioned, to be in such a learning curve for you as an undergrad, coming out with the idea, turning the idea into something that is you can actually hold on to and being able to practicalize it. It would have definitely been a learning curve for you.
I'm just lucky. If I didn't have the team that I had with Open Ed, with Jacob Heisek and Kyle Ritchie, Jordan Terpstra, and Stephanie Craig, I'd be shot. I'd be euchred. That's just the way it is. So those guys have been super great in terms of helping me not only make this podcast happen, but helping me actually organize the podcast in a way that's going to be great. They're the real experts. They're the real brains behind it. I'm just the voice.
You are the one actually doing the podcast. It takes a lot of effort to bring something of that sort out. So, yeah, you have to give credit to yourself as well. Yeah. So that being said, what has been the most important thing you have learned so far?
There's been a lot of aspects to the podcast that have been great for learning. Part of it's in terms of professional development. Like I said before, and this is my first time ever working in an office, and to sit down and learn to embrace teamwork and feedback has been critical in terms of building that skill for myself. But also, like, sitting down and learning about all these fascinating topics, like I said, ranging from learning about how craft beer is made with Dr. Shane Walker, all the way down to how plants communicate with other postgraduate students, Nicole Berardi. I mean, it's just been absolutely amazing in terms of developing myself as an advocate for agriculture. You can speak on so many different things now, and you're just a bank of knowledge, right? You're constantly developing that knowledge, and now to have more and more of that I can share and use as a tool to help people understand the true intricacies of ag, food, and the environment, that's been invaluable. That's been the most valuable thing for me, I think.
Yeah, you just mentioned something that is really interesting, and it all boils down to what we do on this program, is to let people to know some of the things that are happening in their environment in terms of agriculture, food and agriculture, and to let people to correct some kind of misconceptions. You just mentioned the idea of to be an advocate for agriculture. And obviously, we need a lot of those things, especially in this age of mass media, and social media and all those things, when there's a lot of information going through, and it's always difficult for you to differentiate the truth, from the false, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think it's important, though we've mentioned some of these things, why is it important for agriculture to develop a lot, like advocates, to have people talking on behalf of the industry, to have people clarifying some of the issues we have in the industries now?
Understanding why and how things are done in agriculture. If the general public knows that, it's the greatest step forward for progress. I mean, it's hard to make steps forward when people don't understand what's actually truly happening on these farms. And the more you learn and the more you know, the more accepting people become of this progress, and the easier it is to move forward. I mean, don't get me wrong. You might not hear a lot of people say this, but I really do appreciate some of this activism. I mean, I think you're stubborn to sit on one side and think that you're completely right, in the same way I think you're wrong to sit on the other side and say you're completely right, because the reality is that the best answer often sits somewhere in the middle. And by sharing what truly is, you allow for greater conversation and the most sustainable solutions regarding agriculture, and that's what makes advocacy so important, right? Because you need everyone to have that equal bank of knowledge, so you can then just take the best steps forward that's going to not only be suitable to you in terms of production, but sustainable regarding the environmental impact. Or, it's about making sure that the solution appeases as many people as possible. So that's why it's important, I think.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and like I mentioned earlier, it's part of what we do here, and a lot of other people doing similar things all over this campus and even beyond, because it's really important that we correct the misconceptions and we try to let the general public know what is happening on the farm, what is happening in our labs, especially those who are in very natural science aspect of agriculture. Because a lot of things happening in the lab that people outside, even those of us in the school, don't even know that they exist, right? And it's only through this kind of communication that people will be able to share their stories, share their experiences, and people will get to know what exactly is happening. And this is really great. And that also emphasizes why we need to answer the what, the why, and the how questions about agriculture. just as you are doing in your podcast. So this is great. And just to remind listeners that we are still listening to Food Farm Talk on CFRU 93.3 FM. I'm with your regular host, Abdurrahim Abdullahi, and my distinguished guest, Josh, who is the host of the What?
The Why and How.
The Why and How.
Yeah.
I can mix it. Maybe I'm going to add another aspect to it. So What's Why and How podcast. So Why and How podcast, which is sponsored through the Ontario Agricultural College. Yeah. And it's been an interesting podcast. At least I've heard a couple of episodes which has been great, and I entreat everybody to try to listen to this episode. Not only will it be a learning opportunity for you, but it will be an opportunity for you to understand what is happening in the school in terms of food and agriculture. It is for everybody, not just people in our academics, right? So getting back to you, Josh, let's turn our attention to what the general public can learn from your podcast. We've talked about the fact that it's good to correct misconceptions, to let the people know. But with what you have done so far, what are some of the things that the general public can take out from it?
I think there's a lot that people can learn. I mean, not every episode's going to be geared to you, because we do try to cover an extremely diverse range of things, right? But yeah, I know you can learn about loads of things, like I said, ranging from food to plants to whatever it may be. You could learn about some of the common practices and some of the common misconceptions you come across, and and you can learn. Maybe you'll hear some things you don't necessarily want to hear that may not support your view, but as a listener and as myself, the way that I look at things is going into them with an open mind and trying to understand all sides of the picture so you can better adapt and control your sort of view. I think that anytime you give yourself too many labels, you just take away the opportunity to learn. And
yeah.
And you know what, the cool thing about this podcast is that I'm probably most proud of would be the fact that, hopefully someday someone can carry it on and keep it moving on for years and years to come. So if you don't like me as a host, maybe just hang on, because someone else better might just be on the way. So
I wouldn't say they wouldn't get a better host, but for now, you are the better host.
That's right, I'm the best one because I'm the only one so far.
So, and like I mentioned earlier, you have been doing a great job. I have seen it, and surely, probably you don't want to take up the credit, but surely it's been some very great recordings out there. And yeah, I've really appreciated those I've listened to. And like I mentioned, people also reach out maybe later on to tell you about some of their experiences.
Yeah.
It's been great. So that being said, I just want us to probably dive a little bit deep into one issue of interest to you. So it's been a learning curve. You've grown up from a small community. You've gotten engaged with agriculture at a young age. You've taken the path that many people are shying away from, taking agricultural path in terms of education. It's been an interesting journey for you, and now you've had the opportunity to work in one of the most amazing podcast series I have seen so far.
Oh, that's too kind.
So that's great. We threw out all these learning experiences, and we keep mentioning misconceptions and the need for people to learn more about agriculture. Is there any one topic that have been of interest to you through the podcast, through your experiences? What is it about agriculture? Or be it a misconception or be something important you think people need to know?
Something that I think that is important in terms of advocating for the college, and this is for people that may be looking into agriculture. There's a lot more to agriculture than just putting crops into the ground and or just milking cows. Sure, that's part of it, but they're like the science that goes in agriculture and the advancements that are continually happening, and the constant movement towards being better is so consistent. And I mean, opportunity is amazing. I'm minoring in international development. The amount of opportunity, like the places you can go and the things that you can learn, agriculture is not this two-dimensional thing. It's wonderful. And I mean, we need to stop being so divisive and talking about things in a way that makes it so polarizing, I think, because you look at some of these conversations with meat consumption and whatnot, and that becomes an issue, and people jump back and forth on issues. And if that's your personal philosophy, then that's great. That's an amazing thing, and you can believe what you want. But you've got to understand that, that's someone's livelihood, and advocacy comes in multiple ways. And I think that it's important to remember that, it's not always a two-dimensional thing. So I think that going forward in agriculture, when you're advocating, to make sure that you're not talking down to somebody is important too. And, I'm doing this podcast, I want to frame it in a way that's fair, and a way that gives you information in an unbiased meaning so you can come to your own conclusions. And when it comes to agriculture, it's there's definitely a lot to it, and I hope people can recognize that.
Yeah, that's really amazing, because in the past couple of weeks I've not been at the center of the debates, but I've sat behind and seen a lot of things happening on social media with regards to eating meat, in regards to being a vegetarian, and the pushback against the beef industry, and all this issue tied to climate change. And so there's all this conversation about just polarizing, either yes meat or no meat. But as you mentioned, it goes beyond just the two sides of
there's something
the
that
argument, right?
There's something that I was told actually over one of our podcasts, and Professor Bohr said this, and it really stuck out to me. He said there's a right way to grow beef and there's a wrong way to grow crops. Just because something says plant doesn't necessarily mean that it's better from an environmental standpoint. And I'm sorry, I'm probably rambling a little bit.
No, not really. Like, this is great. I'll take this as an important quotation I'll keep for long.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a thing that varies from practice to practice when it comes to farming, right?
So it's not really just about the output.
Yeah.
It's about how we...
Exactly. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with a personal dietary choice. I think that's great if that's what you believe in, And I think that most people are great, and sometimes we see the negative side of that in the same way that people see the negative side of farming sometimes. And you can't say that one individual is reflective of an entire community. That's just not something you can do. And that's for farming, that's for people with certain dietary choices. That's across the board. It's good to be, it's good to be passionate, but just it's also good to be self-aware, I think.
Self-aware, yeah. We have to always reflect to know that whatever we say might have implications for other people as well, so as not to cross the borders or undermine others' choices.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really great. And I'm sure these are some of the topics that have been covered in one way or the other in the podcast series. And I continue telling listeners that there's a lot for them to learn through the podcast. So can you tell us a little bit about how can people access the podcast and stuff around that?
Yeah, so if you actually go on to the OAC's website, the Ontario Agricultural College's website, you can go into the search bar and type the why and how, and you'll have access to SoundCloud files there if you'd like to listen to it. But also if you go onto Spotify, Apple, or where most podcasts are found, and search the why and how, or the Ontario Agricultural College, you can also find the podcast there. And if you want to follow us on social media, you can type in Y and A&D HOW podcast, and that'll be there as well. So yeah, there's we're releasing intermittently at this point, so hopefully within the next month we'll have another 3 episodes out, I think is what the aim is.
So in terms of the logistics, so how many have you released so far? 3?
Yeah, we have 3 out. We released 3 on the 13th of August. Well, we announced on the 13th of August. Okay. Yeah. So hopefully we'll have more out soon.
Yeah. And how many do we expect in total?
Well, we're currently lined up to do we're doing our 10th. Actually, the day that this will be released, we'll be recording the 10th in the afternoon. Hopefully we'll get 2 more on. We hope to have 12 released by the end of the year, but maybe we'll exceed that. We'll see how the fall semester turns. Yes. Yeah. So
that looks great, and like I said, it's good that some of these things are coming out. And now school is getting back to session. Are there any plans in terms of incorporating it to school activities, or how will it change the dynamics in terms of how you release it? And
yeah, I'm not sure we don't have something completely set in motion yet. At the moment, I think we're gonna continue recording when we can during the school year. But yeah, in terms of moving forward, we'll see what happens. I'll have to sit down with my manager and figure that out.
Is there any possibility this might, as you mentioned earlier, continue after you, or you may continue it next year again? Or
yeah, I would love for someone to be able to have this opportunity. I see how much I've gotten out of it in terms of what I've been able to learn, and I'd hope that someone else gets the same opportunity as what I did here. So, and I hope someone kills it, absolutely destroys it, gets it a billion followers or something. I'd say.
Yeah. So what next for you as an individual? Like now, school is getting back to session, and you are getting to your third year as well, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So what see yourself doing next summer, or like what do you want to move on in terms of? Maybe you want to come and join us on Food Farm Talk.
Maybe. I don't know.
You're always welcome.
Oh, I appreciate that. No, I think that for me, as this year comes up, I'm involved with the Student Federation of the Ontario Agricultural College as one of the representatives on that. So there'll be lots of stuff going on with that. And we're actually in the middle with a few friends of mine of hopefully kickstarting a club, and hopefully an ag policy and politics club, which would be interesting. But
wow.
Yeah, and then just I know it's only going into third year, but starting to look at some postgraduate opportunities to hopefully take advantage of my minor and maybe go somewhere and continue studying after Guelph. I hate to leave this place, but I think one day it's inevitable, unfortunately.
Yeah, we want to keep you here as long as we can. Hopefully you will stay around for much longer.
I've got a question for you. I, as someone that's now kind of on the side of advocating and doing communications, what drove you to do this show? What made you want to do this?
Yeah, so just like you, for me as an individual, I kind of thought that I came, so let me just give you a little bit of story. I came in Guelph almost like 1 year ago.
Yeah.
Like when I came to start my PhD. And I realized as an agriculture, there was virtually nothing and existing on this radio station that was dedicated to just food and agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
It was really surprising for me. And I feel like we are surrounded by agricultural communities, we are surrounded by farms, and the school does a lot of things about agriculture. It's important that people get to know what is happening out there.
Yeah, for sure.
So the whole idea was, let's start a program, let's get people to come and talk about what they are doing, talk about their experiences. And maybe through that, we might just start a conversation, get a conversation going. So that's the basic idea about this program.
Hey, it's great, and you're doing great work, so...
Yeah, so we are almost running out of time, and yeah, I'm really happy that you've come in today to tell it, because it was a very short notice.
No, thanks for having me.
So yeah, I'm really excited, and we hope that maybe I'll get the opportunity to talk with you later, or maybe once the episodes have wrapped up and the episodes like everything is out, to get your entire experience to going through so many months of recording and trying to educate people, to let people know what is happening.
I love that. Yeah, that'd be great.
So what would be your last message to our listeners in terms of people who are just interested in food or just anything related to food and agriculture? What would be your last message?
I'd tell everyone listening to not stop learning. I always ask questions and make sure that when you are getting your information that you're really looking at where it's coming from and getting a well-rounded picture before you start carrying on about something, because I think it's important to make sure that with your knowledge that you're sharing stuff that not only matters to you but is rounded in terms of what you're saying. It's important to be passionate, but it's even better when passion's backed by knowledge.
So that's our last message from Josh Moran in terms of it's better to be passionate, but it's good to be passionate, but it's better when the passion is backed by knowledge. And that's great. And today we've been talking with Josh from Ontario Agricultural College, who has been running the What and How podcast.
Why and How, yeah.
Why and How podcast. Yeah, so, and we've touched on a lot of issues. And if this is of interest to you, as he mentioned earlier, go on, search for on the Ontario Agricultural College website for the Why and How podcast. And you treat yourself with some exciting discussions on that podcast. And it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for listening to another episode of Food Farm Talk. and we hope to see you again next week for another episode.